Hey guys, it's Kevin in my review for the first Purge. And what the first Purge is essentially about is basically what it sounds like. Basically, we go all the way back to when the Purge first began. Basically, it was this social experiment in Staten Island, and basically everyone is sort of preparing for the Purge or whatever, and they're really gearing up to see if anyone's going to participate. Meanwhile, you got Marisa Tomei's character, who she basically is the one who has come up with this experiment, and she is watching all the various acts that go on, you know, see if this actually can gain some traffic, and see if this actually can do some good for the world, and that's really all there is to say. So, first Purge in general. This is a film that I'm sure many people are absolutely despising. I have friends who tell me that this is one of their least favorite franchises, maybe the worst franchise going on in Hollywood right now. They want nothing to do with it. They were absolutely dreading the hell out of this movie. I, on the other hand, am not really the person to say that, because I've really only seen the first movie. Now, I can't say first Purge anymore because we have a movie called The First Purge, but yeah, the only one I've seen prior to this film is the original Purge movie, which I remember being alright. It's really not a good film at all. It really is pretty terrible looking back on it. It has some just really cliche characters and some of the dumbest kids in a film that you could see in a while. I mean, just that kid that lets that one stranger in during the Purge night, because that's such a smart idea. So, needless to say, I wasn't necessarily dreading this film. I definitely wasn't looking forward to it either. This looked like absolute shit. It looked like just a really dumb movie overall, and it looked so unnecessary. I heard many people say that as bad as the third one was, it did a good job of closing out the trilogy, and it made it seem like that was the end of the series. But of course, not the case. We now have this film, and how is this film? It's pretty bad, as expected, but it's not as bad as I think it could have been. The first Purge, while an incredibly unnecessary film, is just a little bit better than I really did expect it to be, but it's still not really saying much of anything, because it's still a pretty bad movie overall. But we're just getting to right now, starting off with the cast. And I will say right off the bat, that is the thing that I think really does elevate this film from the others. Now, again, I can't say anything about 2 and 3. I remember the first one had alright acting. Ethan Hawke obviously was great. Everyone else was just kind of whatever. But here, I do think everyone did a pretty good job. And specifically that of Noel, who going in this movie, I really didn't know anything about this actor, and I have to say, he did a really great job here. I was very impressed by the character of Dimitri. This is someone who, basically throughout the other 364 days of the year, he is this drug dealer, basically. He runs this gang, and he just has gone down a very dark path, and he's very feared by everyone. You know, everyone is very much trying to stop him from participating in the Purge, and I do think he did a really good job, particularly towards the end of this movie. He really does have some really great scenes. It's just sucks that he's really saddled with a very one-note character, because I do think Noel really did elevate this character as a whole, and like I said, I do think he really could go somewhere. I could definitely see this guy becoming the next great character actor, and I really do want to see him in something better than this, because he honestly really did impress me here, way more than I really did expect him to be, but he was really good here. Also really good is Lex Scott Davis. Now, I've only seen her in 2 films besides this one. The only other film I've seen her in prior to this was the remake of Superfly, and I thought she was alright in that, but here, I thought she was really good as Naya. Naya is basically the moral compass of this movie. She's basically the person who's trying to get Dimitri out of this gang, and she's trying to get him to go straight and care more for the family and provide more for them. And there's a really great scene between her and Dimitri, and I thought she did a really great job. And even in parts of this movie, similar to Dimitri, where the movie really isn't working at all, she really does a good job of anchoring it. The bond between these two is pretty much the heart of the film, and I do think she worked very well here. I really did enjoy her character overall. And then the rest of the cast here ranges from pretty good to whatever. Joivan Wade as Isaiah, I did like him in the movie. I thought overall he did a really good job. Again, I could see him in something much better than this because I do think he does have talent. Marisa Tomei, let's talk about her. She's in the movie, she's good for what she has, but she is completely wasted in this film. I mean, there really is no reason for her to be in this movie. You watch this role and you think it's going to go somewhere interesting, and it really doesn't, and despite the fact that she is wasted in the movie, I do think she did a good job of what she had. That's more of a writing problem than an acting problem, but like I said, she did what she needed to do. She did a good job with that. Mugga, this actress that played Dolores, my audience really seemed to like her. I thought she was alright. She's basically like the comedic relief of the film, and I thought she was just okay in the movie. Kristen Solis, I also really like, is this little girl, Selena, that Naya is trying to care for. The whole movie, basically, everyone's trying to protect her because she is a child, and not really much more of a reason than that, but that's why they're trying to protect her. The one person that I really do want to talk about, though, and not at all in a positive way, is the actor that played this one sort of purger who he's referenced as, he's referenced in the movie as this character called the Skeletor. Rotimi Paul, awful in this movie. Everything about this actor was so awful. He delivers every line in this delivery, and everything he just says in this tone of voice, and he never shifts this tone of voice, and it's incredibly unintentionally funny throughout the whole movie, and it's so hard to take this guy seriously. Every time he came on, it ruined the movie that much more. Like I said, when you're with someone like Noel and Davis, the movie isn't that bad, but when someone like him comes on, you remember you're watching a Purge movie, and he really brings this film down a whole other level. I really hated this character. I was glad to see he wasn't in the movie as much as I thought it was going to be, but he is still a pretty crucial part of this movie, and he is pretty much throughout the film, just not as much as I expected, and I was glad to see that. But still, I really could not stand this character. I thought he was easily one of the worst parts of this movie. Definitely one of the worst performances I have seen all year. So unnecessarily over the top, and not in a way where it's funny. It's over the top in the way where it just seems like he's trying to do whatever he can to be intimidating, and instead it just comes across as cringy, and it really did not work at all. I heard a lot of people complaining in the third one about the candy bar girl, and I've seen clips of that. This very much did remind me of that. I thought he was so over the top, and when you watch a Purge movie, this is more the acting that you're used to, and he was just awful. Everyone else I thought was just alright, and that's really all I gotta say with the acting overall. But now let's get to the directing and the writing, because here's the thing. I know a lot of people are very much dragging this movie. The directing, on the other hand, I don't think is something to really get that upset about, because it's not directed by DeMonaco, who I've heard is one of the worst directors working today. It is from Gerard McMurray, and I haven't seen the other Purge movies, but I can tell you this movie did sort of have a different style from them. They're sort of going for a more sort of like the Luke Cage Black Panther version of the Purge. Like, that's really what this is. It's much more of sort of like this, it's like an urban sort of drama at first, and I do think the tone was well realized in the first act of the movie, and once the Purge does happen, it turns into basically what you'd expect. It's just a macabre horror thriller, and that's really all it ends up being, and I guess it does its job, is that he did what he needed to do, and I will give him credit for that overall, but there's just not really much to say about the directing. The writing, on the other hand, yeah, that's a different story, because I will say, as much as people don't like James DeMonaco, I was surprised where at first the writing was actually really good. I was actually really getting into the movie at first. They do a very good job of saying the dynamic of Dimitri and Naya, this sort of divide that they have, where Dimitri is someone where he is on a path where he is, you know, on redemption, and he wants to use the Purge as a way to get people to, you know, remember them, and he's going to participate in the Purge. But you have Naya, who's trying to get him not to do that because he is influencing her brother Isaiah's decisions, and he is getting very much, you know, basically he is very much getting, you know, abused, and he's in a very dangerous situation because of this. And I thought that stuff was very strong. There's one scene in the movie in particular between these two where she talks about how he is just what he is doing essentially is just as nefarious as everything going on in the Purge. And again, I was like, wow, this is actually really well done. I'm really liking where this character growth goes. Unfortunately, once we get to the Purge side of the movie, that all goes out the fucking window. Once we get to that, the movie becomes solely based on, are these characters going to survive? That's all the movie really cares about after any sort of social commentary they could have had surrounding Dimitri. It's just gone, and it's really disappointing, and I know it's a Purge movie. This is what I should expect from it, but again, I have not seen the second and the third movie, and me being someone who hasn't, regardless of that, I was really getting into the character stuff, and I was really hoping we would have a really intriguing arc where he tries to stop Isaiah from joining the Purge, but no, Isaiah, he has this one sort of altercation with the Skeletor character, and suddenly he wants to be part of the Purge, and we never really understand it. Everything feels so incredibly rushed when it comes to the writing, and everything is so underwritten, and it's coming from a very surface level perspective, and really that one scene is the only thing in the movie that really felt like they were going for something a little bit deeper and that they were trying to get more into the characters, and it very much did frustrate me in that regard because, again, these are good characters. These are characters I did somewhat care about. I just really wanted a lot more from. Like, when we focus on the main group of survivors in this movie, yeah, I was into it. Yeah, I was really enjoying their characters, but it was when they would get cut back to the Purge and we realized how dumb of a situation this is, the tone very much did clash in that regard, because on one hand you have this story that feels very grounded in reality and it feels like it actually could happen. But then when we get to the Purge side of things, it's so ridiculous and so over the top that there's just no way that this could possibly happen. And that's also, I think, the biggest problem with this movie. The movie is trying so hard to be relevant and be timely to the situation going on today. So much so that in the movie we have almost all of the heroes being played by people of color and all of the villains in this movie basically just being white corporate bastards. It's a very subtle film if you can't tell. I mean, this film really, it's shoving pretty much everything down your throat. It's trying to make all these real-life parallels to homeless people and to the Black Lives Matter organization, a little bit of gentrification in there, and it's just not at all the film to do that. The movie is just not smart enough to delve into these issues, and it's way too focused on, let's just get to the next kill, let's just get to the next really crazy violent scene. And I would not have a problem with that if it was meant to make some sort of statement, but to me, all the violence in this film just seemed like it was there just to shock and entertain the audience. It did not seem like it was coming from a political perspective. It's coming from an entertaining perspective. So if anyone says these movies have relevant social commentary, I really don't understand it, because to me it seems like all this movie is it's just a film that is meant to entertain. And that's what was so frustrating about those opening 20 minutes, because I did think they did set up a pretty compelling story. They just don't really go anywhere with it. It just becomes a story of survival after a while, and it gets very stale. But my other biggest problem with this movie is that the movie is trying so hard to give you all these unexplained questions of this is why the Purge happened and this is what the main intent was, when to me all of that seems incredibly obvious. Like, the movie gets into the idea that the reason that the government did this is basically because there were overpopulation issues and they were doing this as a way to usher out some of those people, and so that way they could, you know, they wouldn't have to pay for all this stuff and they'd be able to continue to pay for you know, housing and things like that because there is no unemployment rates. And to me, all of that seemed incredibly obvious. Nothing really in here felt necessary. Like, it felt like this movie was really only made so they can promote the new TV show that's going to be on USA that everyone's so excited about. It's going to show, you know, what happens the other 364 days of the year, which honestly sounds pretty boring. I don't really know why anyone would want that. And like I said, it's a film that's trying so hard to justify its existence when it simultaneously does the complete opposite. It shows why we didn't need this film and how obvious most of this really was. The movie doesn't really introduce anything that different that the other movies didn't. And I mean, again, I haven't seen 2 and 3, but from what I've heard, those movies pretty much you know, fleshed out everything you could possibly do with The Purge, and this movie just feels like it's very much milking that concept, and there just really isn't much else to do with it overall. Also, the dialogue in this movie is, again, very 50-50, because you'll have a scene with Dimitri and, you know, Nia, and it has this really good sort of dialogue to it. Like, there's a great line where she says that we purge 365 days of the year, but you are just as bad as them the other 364. Like, that's a really good line. I really did enjoy that delivery. Then you'll have a line of Nia basically being sexually abused by this one purger and calling him a pussy-grabbing motherfucker. Yeah, so that's the kind of dialogue we're dealing with here. It's very 50-50, and like I said, when we're cutting back to those characters, it just feels like a completely different movie, and one that I would have much rather seen than what we really did end up getting here. And I think it mainly is because of the clash of the directing and the writing. You very much do see that here, and I think that really is the biggest problem with this film overall, is that you have a director who is trying to do something fresh, but unfortunately it's written by the same guy who did the first 3 Purge movies, and he thinks he knows what he's doing, and he's trying to infuse the same tone and keep that same sort of spirit that the other movies did have, and it just does not really fit in here, unfortunately. Also, going back to Marisa Tomei's character, utterly wasted, literally has next to nothing to do. All she really does in this movie is look on a monitor of all of the crime that is going on and tries to report everything, and for a while, they kind of set her up as someone who's really interesting, someone who is doing this for a good reason. Like, they try to get you to understand the morality of, like, why someone would really want this to happen, what she's really trying to do here. And once she starts to get into something interesting, you know, like, they were building to something with her, the film just gets rid of her, and they forget that she even exists, and it really just left me wondering, why was she even in this movie? Someone like Marisa Tomei, who is probably the most well-known actor in this movie, and is probably only there because, you know, people who don't watch The Purge, they'll hear Marisa Tomei and they'll be like, oh, Aunt May's in this, I'm definitely gonna see it. She has, like, nothing to do. So, yeah, you're not even gonna get your money's worth from that, and I think that was definitely a huge disappointment. I wasn't expecting much from her to begin with, but I was definitely expecting them to do a little bit more with her than what we did end up getting in this movie, because honestly, she had next to nothing to do here. And going back to The Purge, when we do get to those elements, it's hard to really take the movie seriously, because on one hand, we have this grounded story of, like I said, these people who are trying to survive. You got someone who is a drug lord, and he's trying to get out of the situation, and then we'll cut to The Purge, and there's a scene where all of them are standing around and they're trying to get past all the purgers, and we see the best character in the movie, Skeletor, pulls out a gun, and you think he's gonna shoot them. He pulls the trigger and fucking water comes out. Yeah, there is literally a scene in this movie involving water guns. That's what we've reduced to here. That is the level of idiocy we are really at in these movies, and that should just tell you how unintelligent the series is and how much it is so not ready to deal with these much more serious issues that it's trying so hard to go for in this film. That's mainly due to cinematography, which is just very bland here. They really did not put any thought into the cinematography. The only scene that really stuck out to me are a couple scenes towards the end. That block party scene, it's not even that long in the film. Like, it's very quick. Like, the thing you saw in the trailer, that's only like one scene in the film. There are some okay scenes, I guess, but I just never really cared that much, and I thought the cinematography, it felt very half-assed. Like, it felt like they could have delved a lot deeper into it, and I just did not really feel the cinematography here. Also, in terms of the score in this movie, there's really not much to say. It's pretty sad when the only thing I remember in terms of the score was the Kendrick Lamar song that plays at the end. That's literally the only thing I remember when it comes to the score. I love the song that played at the end, but that's, again, the song is much more subtle than basically everything in this movie. There really is nothing subtle there. And the editing, the movie is an hour and 30 minutes, and it honestly did feel like 2 hours after a while. Like, especially once the Purge kicked in, it really does start to drag because it becomes very obvious how the movie's going to end, what's going to happen. You never really get the sense the characters are in any real danger, and it just does not really go anywhere that interesting. So, like I said, the first Purge really did disappoint me because I did think it set up some really interesting stuff in the beginning. I thought that it did have a pretty solid setup. The cast isn't as bad as they could be. There are some really awful actors in this movie, like Skeletor and things like that, but there is enough stuff for me to praise here, and it's that much more disappointing when there's just as much stuff for me to say, no, you should not see it, and that's something I really was upset with this film. I thought, like I said, the writing was really bad. Everything felt very half-baked. You have characters that could have gone somewhere interesting, but they just don't flesh them out enough. You have a story here that just feels so run-of-the-mill, and it feels like it's really run its course, and I just don't really feel like there was much more you can do with this concept overall, unfortunately. I know they're making a TV series, and maybe it'll be a good idea. Maybe they'll explore some things we have not seen in these movies, but just personally to me, I don't really understand why they'd even do this. The Purge concept in general, I think, is honestly ridiculous because even if the Purge was going on, what is there that says that the criminals would not be roaming the city the other 364 days of the year? I mean, we literally saw that in this movie. So, no, the Purge doesn't do shit, and I don't really understand what the actual concept of this series really is all about anymore. It just does not really make a lot of sense to me. Like I said, the first Purge, it's a really awful movie. It's not as bad as I think it could have been, but it still is a film that is still really bad and still, I think, very much does show just how unnecessary this film really is. It tries to spy in existence, and it does the complete opposite, unfortunately. And I am going to give the first Purge overall a D+. Just skip it, guys. It's really not worth seeing. It has a very solid first 20 minutes, but right after that, it just descends into something really dumb and really silly, and I just really wasn't a fan of it. But either way, guys, over this video, hope you enjoyed. We'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.